Here we're working on a medium logic puzzle. This one's called Aircrafts of World War II. There are 6 in this document. We will do that first one, and you will do 2 on your own for full credit. If you do 1 more on your own, you get 7 out of 10. Somewhere in between, you could get some partial credit if you do 1 and start the second one. Let's go over Aircrafts of World War II. Again, at any point, if you want to try to do some on your own or just get this one started on your own, pause the video and then play it when you're ready. So let me do this one here. And the clues are a little bit different than on the basic ones. So we'll skip some, we'll jump around, we'll go off of the grid as opposed to the clues. Let me read the first clue. Exactly one of the aircrafts has the same initial in its name and its nationality. So they're saying Farman goes with French, or Grabowski goes with German, or Junkers goes with Japanese, Showa goes with Soviet. Only one of those can be true, not more than one. That's not super helpful at the moment, so I'm going to skip it and come back to it later. Number 2, the Grabowski was launched 2 years later than the Showa. Neither of them was French. Okay, well, the neither of them was French clue is helpful. The Grabowski is not French, and the Showa is not French. So let me X out Grabowski in French, Showa in French. Neither of them is French. Also, if the Grabowski was launched 2 years later than the Showa, then there's some years that the Grabowski can't have launched or couldn't have launched. The Grabowski couldn't have launched in 1934 because then the Showa would be 1932. Also, the Grabowski could not be 1939 because then the Showa would have been 1937 if the Grabowski was 2 years later, right? So I can do that. And similarly, the Showa was launched 2 years before the Grabowski, according to this clue, which means the Showa can't be here because then the Grabowski would be 1938, and the Showa can't be here because then the Grabowski would be 1943. So no check so far, but I was able to do some X's from this clue number 2. Haven't used it up yet, but I used some from it. Number 3, the Japanese aircraft was the number 88 or the L2D. So here's Japanese. It was either 88 or L2D. Since those are in the same category of label, that means that the Japanese can't be the other 2 labels, the 11 or the 400. So I can cross those off. And that's all I can do there. The Soviet vessel wasn't the Farman. Okay, we can cross off Soviet and Farman and be done there. The Junkers wasn't the L2D. Okay, I can do that. The Junkers and L2D is crossed off. And it was released 2 years after the aircraft number 400. Couple things I can do with that. The Junkers was released after the 400, so that means the Junkers is not equal to the 400. So I can cross those off, Junkers and 400. If it was released 2 years after another one, then it couldn't be 1934 because then the 400 would be released in 1932. And again, it couldn't be 1939, right? Because then it would have to be 1937 for the 400. And again, the flip side of that is if there's something that's being launched 2 years before, or sorry, something that's being launched 2 years after 400, then 400 can't be the latest year. So here's 400. The 400 could not have been in 1941 because there's nothing 2 years after that. And similarly, it can't be 1936 because there's nothing 2 years after 1936. This is 3 years after. Okay, how about number 6? Germany launched an aircraft in an odd year if and only if the Showa was launched in an even year. That's interesting. We won't probably see this clue very much, but we can do something with it. It says the Germany was an odd year if and only if Showa was an even year. What do we know about Showa? Showa had to have been, I guess it could be either even or odd. Okay, so I'm not sure then. I'm going to skip that clue number 6. 7, Japan launched an aircraft in 1936 or in 1939. Okay, So I can find Japan. Japan can't be 30, or has to be 36 or 39, which means it can't be 1934 or 1941. And I can cross that off. Number 8, the Soviet aircraft was deployed 5 years after the German one. By the way, just a side note here. When you are doing these, I would highly recommend crossing off these clues if you have this printed out or are doing it on a separate piece of paper. Physically cross it out so that you have less to look at. Okay, Soviet aircraft was deployed 5 years after the German one. Well, Soviet and German are not the same, we know that. If the Soviet was deployed 5 years after the German one, then the Soviet could not have been in what years? There's no way the Soviet could have been in 1934, because then if it was 5 years after the German, that would be 1929. That's not in there. Similarly, the Soviet can't be 1936, because then 5 years before that is 1931, which is not on the table. But the Soviet could have been 1939, because then the German one would be 5 years before 1939, which is 1934. So that seems possible. Same thing with 1941. For the German side of this, if there's an aircraft that is deployed after the German one, then the German one can't be 1941, because there's nothing 5 years after 1941. And there's also nothing 5 years after 1939. So the German can't be 1939. German aircraft wasn't the number 11. Okay, simple enough. German and 11 we can cross off. All right. Now, I can go back. I've gone through all the clues one time, and that wasn't super helpful, right? I still don't have any checks. I also don't have any columns or rows where there are 3 X's. So I can't say anything for sure. So I'm going to have to go back through the clues again. I still can't do anything with this clue. F with F, G with G, J with J. Those are all possible. The Grabovski was launched 2 years later than the Showa. Can we do anything there? No, we haven't done anything. The Showa could be 34, the Grabovski could be 36, or the Showa could be 39, Grabovski could be 41, okay? How about 5? The Junkers wasn't the L2D, and it was released 2 years after the aircraft number 400. Well, 2 years after the 400. The 400 could be in 34 or 39, which means the Junkers could be in 36 or 41. Okay, so still nothing there. Let's think about this. Germany launched an aircraft in an odd year, if and only if the Showa was launched in an even year. Aha. So let's look at Germany. Germany has to be in either 1934 or 1936, which means Germany is not in an odd year. Therefore, since Germany is not an odd year, the Showa can't be in an even year. So I can cross off the Showa with 1934, because it can't be an even year based on this clue. And that helps, right? So now I've used up that clue. And Showa has to be 1939, and 1934 has to go with the Farman. All right, that is helpful. Good. Can we do anything with this? Soviet aircraft deployed 5 years after the German one. Soviet years, German years, no, nothing changed there. But, so I've gone through all my clues again, and I'm still not real sure about how I can use them. So now that we have 2 checks, I'm going to try to use some of those and see what happens. Since Farman goes with 1934, but Farman doesn't go with Soviet, then Soviet can't go to 1934. However, I think I already know that. Yes, okay, never mind. The Showa, that goes with 1939, okay? And the Showa doesn't go with the French. So if the Showa goes with 1939, but not the French, then French and 1939 can't go together. So let me cross off French with 1939. We can say that for sure. And I think those are the only real places we can use our checks here, right? We said the Showa wasn't 39, and we said 1934 was the Farman. Farman's not Soviet, but Soviet's not 34. Yeah. Okay, so I've used the checks here, and how I know that is like I found a check and went in that row and column and looked for any other markings, and there's nothing else to say here. So let me go again through the clues. I still don't feel great about this clue number 1. How about clue number 2? The Grabowski was launched 2 years later in the Showa. Ah, yes. So the Showa was 1939. Therefore, the Grabowski has to be 2 years later in that. The Grabowski has to be 1941. And that means the Junkers has to be 1936. Okay, that's helpful. Neither of them is French. We already know that. Done with this clue. Now, again, let's use this check mark we just got. Anytime you get a check mark, see if you can line it up with other X's in the row or column. Since Grabowski is 1941, but Grabowski can't be French, that means 1941 can't be French. 1941 French. So that's going to be an X right there. And that is great because that tells me 1941 has to be the Soviet. That is a check. Again, 1939 only has one option, the Japanese. So that's a check right there. Good. Let's see how, again, we can use those checks. Since 1939 goes with Japanese, and Japanese isn't 400, that means that the, let's see, say again, 39 is Japanese, Japanese isn't 400, then 439 can't go together. So that's an X. Again, that's super helpful. That tells me the 400 label is on the one that deployed in 1934. And again, look at this. We know that 1934 and 400 go together, and also 1934 and Farman go together. So therefore, Farman and 400 go together. So let's check off Farman and 400 right there. That's good. What else can we say? We can say 1939 was the Japanese, and the Japanese was not 11, so 11 can't be 1939. What else can we do? Guess I could go back to the clues. Junkers wasn't the L2D, and it was released 2 years after the 400. Well, guess what? We just learned that the 400 was released or deployed in 1934. So 2 years after 1934 is 1936. That is the Junkers. The Junkers, oh, we already know that. It's 1936. Okay, so I'm done with that clue then. How about number 8? The Soviet aircraft was deployed 5 years after the German one. Well, the Soviet was in 1941. We know that. And again, you can be filling up your clues here, or I should say your answers, on the bottom right of your page. We know some of them, so we can fill them in the chart here. The Soviet was deployed in 41. That's 5 years after the German one. So the German one has to be 5 years before 41, which is 1936. 1936 and German is a check. And that means 1934 has to be the French. Great. All right, so we used every clue except for number 1. And I still am not sure how to use that. So I'm going to go off of the grid here. 1934 goes with French. Again, I'm looking for a check, and I'm looking for where it lines up with X's and how I can use that. 1934 goes with French. French doesn't go with Showa, so Showa doesn't go with 34. We already know that. All right, so I don't know if I can do anything there. But what do we know about 1934? 1934 goes with the French, and 1934 goes with the Farman. So that means that French and Farman go together. And I can fill that in my table here. That's good. And that is actually this last clue. Exactly one of the aircrafts has the same first initial in its name and nationality. Farman and French, name and nationality, both start with an F. So that means that no other aircraft has the same first letter in name and nationality. So Grabowski doesn't go with German. Junkers doesn't go with Japanese. Showa doesn't go with Soviet. Now I think I can solve the puzzle even without doing that. So let me try that. Let me X those out and see if we can still solve the puzzle either way. Let's look for another check. Here's one in 1941. Okay, great. 1941 goes with the Soviet. Okay. We also know that 1941 goes with Grabowski. So therefore, Grabowski and Soviet go together. That might make sense simply because Grabowski is a Russian-sounding name. Soviets were Russian. Okay. Again, let's play that same game here. 1936, I know a check about 1936. It goes with Junkers. What else do we know about 1936? Down here, it goes with German. So German and Junkers go together with a check. That means the Showa has to be Japanese. So how much can we fill out here? Everything except the labels. That's great. All right. And again, now I've used up that clue. So I'm done with the clues. The only thing left to do is to figure out these labels using the checks we already have. So let's see. The only check that we know for sure is that the 400 goes to 1934, which is the farm, and we got that taken care of. So sometimes you just got to stop and look at the whole puzzle and see where you can go. Let's see here. Grabowski goes with Soviets in 1941. 1941 can't be the 400. Okay, so we already know that. I'm going to be looking for something here, and then I'll explain it when I can. Junkers is German. German is 36. Let's do the 1939. 1939 is the Showa. And the Showa is the Japanese. Japanese 1939. We know that 1939 is not the 11. And since 1939 is the Showa, but not the 11, the Showa can't be the 11. We could X that there. How about the Junkers? Let's see here. Junkers is German. It's 36. The Junkers can't be the L2D. And the Junkers goes with 1936. So therefore 1936 can't be the L2D. Cross that off. Again, if at any point you are confused by something, maybe rewind 10 seconds and listen to it again. See if it makes sense. What else can we say? How about this 11? German is not 11, but German is 1936. Aha. Yeah, this is it. So I have a sort of a stray X here. This is how I knew where to look. Since the German and 11 don't go together, but German and 1936 do go together, that means there's no way that 1936 and 11 can go together. So 11 and 1936 are an X, and that should do it for us, right? You can fill out this row right there, fill out this column right here, fill that out, and now we should be able to figure out the rest of the labels. Grabowski goes with 41. 41 goes with 11. So Grabowski is 11. And that's it. Junkers has to be 88. Showa, L2D. Got it. Very cool. Okay. So you can see why this is a tougher level, and I'm only having you do 2 on your own from the remaining 5 in this PDF that will be on Classroom. Again, if you can successfully do 1 more out of these remaining 5, you can get a 7 out of 10 automatically. If you can do 2, that's 10 out of 10. You can get partially complete, 1 full one and then a second partial one. I'll give you an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, depending on how far you get. This is due Thursday at 5 p.m., so you've got all week to work on it. Please email me if you have any questions. Let me give you a reminder about office hours. That is the 3rd post currently on Classroom. It's every Wednesday from 12:30 to 12:45, where I'll be sitting at my computer at school with Google Meet, this link pulled up, ready for you to join if you have any questions. If it goes past 12:45, that's fine. I am free until 1:15. I just set this as the time for you to initially join. So please give these a try. They'll be posted on Classroom. Watch the video a couple times if you have to, and let me know if you have questions. I'd really like to help you, and I think that you should be able to do at least 1 and hopefully 2 of these puzzles.